Hello friends, welcome back. Let us continue with our discussion with motivation. In our previous session, I have discussed about the meaning, definition of motivation, what is the process of motivation and importance of motivation based on needs, drive, motives, incentives. Today, I am going to discuss about further regarding the different theories of motivation, the classical theories and the contemporary theories of motivation. Even if I start discussing about the contemporary theories of motivation, it would not justify that we do not have to talk about the classical theories of motivation. So, before getting more into details about different theoretical aspects of motivation, I will start with Maslow's need hierarchy theory. This is the foremost and the most classical theory of motivation given by Abraham Maslow. This is one of the most famous classical and ancient theory of motivation based on that how to motivate employees while they are able to satisfy their needs which are basic to an individual's motivation, and once one cadre of or level of need is satisfied, the individual is motivated to work to satisfy his or her other kind of needs. So, in short, I will just talk about that what Maslow has hypothesized about this need hierarchy theory. According to Maslow, every human being has some or the other needs. When one need is satisfied, the other need evolves, the second, the third and so on. Basically, needs are unlimited, wants are unlimited, and every time an individual is motivated to satisfy every kind of need for his own survival. Therefore, Maslow has identified a need hierarchy where he has talked about not only about his survival, but also from the other perspectives that how an individual is motivated to maintain his own esteem and actualize his personal growth or focus on his personal growth. And no matter whatever kind of need an individual experiences, the need deficiency an individual experiences, there is a kind of action orientation to satisfy those needs. The only focus can be made according to Maslow is that those needs have been identified based on hierarchy. There is classification of needs in hierarchy. So, the first need that he has talked about is physiological needs. Physiological or psychological needs, these needs include hunger, thirst, shelter and other bodily needs. This is the foremost and most essential need that an individual needs to satisfy for his own survival. For example, it is hunger, thirst, the person is motivated to make an arrangement to satisfy his hunger and thirst. The other bodily needs, for example, in terms of reproduction, in terms of body temperature, that how an individual tries to maintain his body temperature to make him comfortable. For example, if it is very cold, the person will try to maintain his body temperature by wearing thermals. So, these are the needs which an individual requires for his own survival, and they forms the most basic form of need. If these needs are not satisfied, the person cannot work or cannot be in action to be motivated to satisfy his other kind of needs. So, once these physiological or psychological needs are satisfied, the person moves on to safety needs. These needs are also very important for an individual survival and includes security and protection from physical and emotional harm. Protecting oneself from external threats and dangers. It can be in terms of protecting oneself physically from any kind of danger to his life, or it can be to protect himself emotionally while finding people with whom he or she can share his problems, grievances and ultimately tend to find a sense of satiation in terms of emotionality. So, these are the safety needs. The other are the social needs. These needs include sense of affection, compassion or sense of belongingness. So, these kind of social needs include affection, belongingness, acceptance and friendship or compassion. These needs are something that even a child needs to satisfy these kind of need, or even an adult wants to satisfy these needs in terms of belongingness, acceptance, friendship or compassion. The other is esteem needs, which also have a very great significance in an individual's life. For example, this includes self-respect, autonomy, achievement, external factors such as status, recognition and attention. It can be about social status. By contributing to the society, the person garners lot of respect and esteem, or he garners lot of recognition and a sense of achievement. It can be at workplaces as well, that how an individual performs the best develop new skills, take up new challenges and gains more achievement and recognition. And the last is, which is the highest form of an individual's need as well as in Maslow's hierarchy, is self-actualization needs. These needs are the drive to become what an individual is capable of becoming and includes growth, achieving one's own potential and self-fulfillment. It is about gaining lot of experience throughout his life and then using those experiences for something ahead to contribute to the society. For example, any CEO who has continued and contributed to any organization in terms of taking the organization to a higher feat, then again he can use his experiences and knowledge, skills and abilities to take up more initiatives and then use those experiences for better reasons and contributions. These are the 5 human needs that Maslow has divided into hierarchy, where physiological or psychological needs forms the most basic form of needs. Without the satisfaction of these needs, the person is unable to survive, and without the satisfaction of these needs, an individual cannot think of satisfying the other kind of needs. So, once the level, every level of need is satisfied, the person moves on to the another hierarchy of needs. So, based on this diagrammatic representation, this is Maslow's need hierarchy theory, where physiological need is the most basic form of needs about air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing and reproduction. The safety needs, it constitutes personal security, employment, resources, health, property. The other is love and belonging, friendship, intimacy, family and sense of connection. Esteem needs, this includes respect, self-esteem, status, recognition, strength and freedom. And the last is, which is the topmost, which is very difficult to actualize as well or to reach, that is self-actualization. It is a desire to become the most that one can be. It is completely based on an individual's experience. So, this is a general Maslow's need hierarchy theory which talks about the needs which prevails in work and non-work domain. But at the same time, next to Maslow's need hierarchy theory, he has also identified the hierarchy of work motivation based on the needs at work. So, if we talk about the basic needs of an individual which forms the base of an individual's work is the basic pay. What an individual requires to satisfy his basic needs is the salary, the basic salary. So, this forms the most basic form of need of an employee at work, that is pay. Once the person is satisfied with the pay, he tries to think and become motivated to satisfy the other kinds of needs at work in form of security needs such as seniority plans, insurance, union, employee assistance plans, severance, pay and pension. So, once an individual is satisfied with his pay, he is motivated to look after the other kind of needs which can secure his future. So, this security can only come at work through insurance plans, union or pension schemes, that what an individual and what manner he or she can secure his job and his finances. Once the security needs are satisfied, the person moves on to the social needs, where the person tries to join different kinds of formal and informal groups and or even teams and tend to showcase his all the skills and competencies that he or she possesses and tries to share or maintain friendship with interest with the other co-workers. The other is esteem needs. These include titles, status, symbols, promotions and banquets. These are the promotions based on an individual's performance and assessment. The person performs at high level, then he also gains some recognition in form of promotions, in form of status symbols that he can acquire, he procures, and that reflects his position in the organization. So, point is that as soon as the basic need is satisfied, the employee tries to satisfy and move on to reach the other levels of needs in terms of security needs, social needs and esteem needs. And the last is self-actualization needs, which entails personal growth and realization of potential. As I mentioned, any CEO who has contributed for years to any organization and based on this competency, based on his experience, the CEO as an individual employee of that organization can also take better initiatives to contribute more to the organization, actualize his own potential, that what next he can do or contribute to the organization, and then satisfy his own need in form of personal growth, because initially maybe the same person is very much engaged in contributing to the organization in form of organizational effectiveness and efficiency or organizational outcomes, but there is a point when the person even realizes what he can be or what he wants to be beyond that. That is the highest level of need, that is self actualization needs. These are the classification of needs of employees at work, but definitely this theory has also received some kind of criticism in terms of that it is not necessary every time that any individual employee will only move as per the hierarchy that is mentioned in the Maslow's hierarchy, that if basic pay is satisfied, then maybe employee will only be motivated to satisfy his security needs and then social needs, esteem needs and self actualization. The series of this hierarchy can also vary from person to person. This is the only criticism that most of the time this theory faces, but yes, the contribution of Maslow in OB area is that how employee needs or maybe human needs work in sync, that motivates every time a person to satisfy one need, second need or the higher order needs. So, this theory, Maslow's need hierarchy theory, forms the basis for the formation of the other theoretical assumptions of motivation. So, this is one theory of motivation. Let us move on to the next, that is Herzberg's two-factor theory of motivation. This is an extension to Maslow's need hierarchy theory, or it is upgradation of Maslow's need hierarchy theory, which is also known as Herzberg's motivation hygiene theory or dual factor theory or two-factor theory. Here Maslow has stated that there are certain factors in the workplace that causes job satisfaction and there are certain factors that causes dissatisfaction, all of which act independently of each other. The point here that Herzberg has made is that any employee who is performing his job, then there are certain factors which give him satisfaction and there are certain factors which give him dissatisfaction. But the difference is that factors which satisfy an individual is not necessarily that they will also motivate. So, what factors satisfies and motivate employee, that was the most major focus of Herzberg's two-factor theory. So, he collected the data based on the critical incident method from 200 accountants and engineers and essentially asked two important questions. When did you feel particularly good about your job, that is what turned you on to this job, and when did you feel exceptionally bad about your job, that is what turned you off. This is a very common question that was asked by the respondents by Herzberg, because every job has its own pros and cons, but what are those factors which gives more satisfaction and motivation to the employees. So, it was found that there was a continuum, that either they were satisfied or they were not satisfied, or they were dissatisfied or not dissatisfied. So, there is a continuum in form of that there are two factors which can either satisfy or either motivate. Definitely satisfaction is there, but to certain degree that satisfaction will not motivate, but at the other point there will be certain factors who will go beyond satisfaction and they will motivate employees. So, what are those factors? So, based on the responses of the 200 accountants and engineers, it was found that there were certain factors which were very much related to the job and they were basically just satisfying, that is it, right. But there were certain factors which were beyond something satisfaction and they were motivated, that means the employees were motivated. So, based on the responses, Herzberg identified two kind of factors, hygiene factors and motivators. So, hygiene factors, they were related to the job, but they were termed as dissatisfiers because they were not motivated, they were not motivating employees, whereas motivators were related to the content of the job and they were satisfiers because they were motivating the employees. So, there is a difference, that why hygiene factors are dissatisfiers, because those factors were not motivating the employees, whereas motivators were not only leading to satisfaction, but they were also leading to motivation. So, what are those factors? So, it was identified from data that company policy and administration, supervision, technical aspects of the job, salary, interpersonal relationships and work conditions, they were the only satisfiers in terms of that they were just maintaining a level of satisfaction, not dissatisfaction. There was only no satisfaction. So, these are the hygiene factors which prevent a person to not to leave the job and just performing the job as a routine task, whereas motivators were related to the content and they were more leading to satisfaction and motivation. Why? Because those jobs, employees who indicated that the job is challenging, they have more achievement orientation in their job, they are more recognized for their performance, there are more advancement opportunities to do something meaningful, there is more responsibility and there is involvement in decision making. When the jobs were providing all these kind of factors and opportunities, this led to not only satisfaction but motivation. So, this is the kind of classification of the factors that motivated employees as per Herzberg. So, there was a continuum. Continuum here means satisfaction, no satisfaction, dissatisfaction, no dissatisfaction, not unsatisfied. So, according to the data, the good and the bad feelings were generated from the employees and it was concluded that job satisfiers are related to job content. Why? Because they were motivators, because they were motivating employees to perform any job, because there is more opportunity, there is more challenge, there is more advancement and growth, there is more participation of decision making. So, this led to more satisfaction because the content of the job was very much challenging and advancement. Whereas job content and the job dissatisfiers are allied to job context. So, job context here means that only factors related to job, but they were not leading to any kind of satisfaction beyond level or any motivation. That is why these factors are termed as dissatisfiers. So, Herzberg called satisfiers as motivators as it is implied in the table, and dissatisfiers as hygiene factors that prevent dissatisfaction, that only minimum level of satisfaction can be experienced, that is it, there is no motivation. So, the most important thing was that out of the data that was collected, the hygiene factors are very necessary to retain the employee, because hygiene factors is a necessary floor to prevent dissatisfaction, but do not motivate it. As I mentioned just now, that dissatisfiers or hygiene factors will not motivate, they will just be there on the job or the organization can retain the employees. Whereas, an individual must have a job with a challenging content and that provide opportunities for achievement, recognition, responsibility, advancement and growth will motivate employees. So, the point is, according to Herzberg, if motivating factors are missing in any job, there is no motivation, there is only dissatisfaction of continuing the job, but not gaining out of beyond performing the task. So, this was the extension of Maslow's need hierarchy theory, that if Maslow has identified all the needs in a hierarchy, he identified in a continuum, that is motivators and hygiene factors. So, this is about Herzberg's two factor theory of motivation. Right. So, this is the contrasting view of satisfaction and dissatisfaction. According to traditional view, it was something that either employees performing the job, it is only satisfaction or dissatisfaction in terms of I am happy with my job and I am unhappy with my job. But according to Herzberg's view, when motivators are included in the job, that means the content is high or heavy, then it leads to satisfaction, and when hygiene factors are high, then it leads to dissatisfaction and there is no motivation. So, this is how Herzberg's two factor theory has been explained, which is an extension of Maslow's need hierarchy theory. So, if I talk about Herzberg's two factor theory and Maslow's need hierarchy theory, they form and they are considered as the classical theories of motivation, and with the advancement these theories also form the basis of some novel or contemporary theories of motivation, which will be the next topic. But yes, in continuation, there were certain possible combinations as well based on the data collection. The first combination is when the hygiene factors are high, then definitely motivation is also high. So, the ideal situation which forms is where employees are highly motivated and a few complaints, definitely they are more motivated. The other combination is high hygiene and low motivation. When motivating factors are high, but still the motivation is low, employees have few complaints but are not highly motivated. For example, the job is viewed as a paycheck. So, in a group or team, how many of employees will perceive their job as motivating or only dissatisfying? Other is low hygiene and high motivation. Under such kind of situation, employees are motivated but have a lot of complaints. That means the motivating factors are less in the job. A situation where the job is exciting and challenging, but salaries and work conditions are not up to par. So, this also creates an imbalance. So, how to maintain that balance? So, dissatisfiers and satisfiers have to be at par. And the last combination is low hygiene and low motivation. This is the worst situation where employees are not motivated and have many complaints. So, that means there are the contents of the job are also missing, and at the same time the context of the job is also very weak in terms of salary, paycheck, working conditions. When these are not balanced, then this leads to low hygiene and low motivation. So, these kind of factors when identified can easily help organizations to identify, underline, delineate those factors which are missing and can motivate employees, which is beyond satisfaction, right. So, this is the Maslow's need hierarchy theory and Herzberg's two-factor theory, which forms the classical base for extension of novel theories of motivation. Okay. Coming further to the contemporary theories of motivation. The early management scholars laid to a foundation that enabled managers to better understand their workers and how best to motivate them. Since then, new theories have given us even better understanding of employee motivation and have been labeled as contemporary theories of motivation. So, what are those theories of motivation which we are going to talk in this section? They are self-determination theory, goal setting theory, self-efficacy theory, reinforcement theory, or equity or organizational justice theory. We will start with self-determination theory by Deci and Ryan in 2000. This is a small case that I am sharing on the screen, where Prerna, who was working for blind people or any organization for blind people, and she was putting in 15 hours of week in reading out to blind children. She was enjoying her job a lot, but after few months she was hired as a full-time salaried employee in that organization, and all of a sudden she realized that she is not finding that much of fun in the job when she was working as a volunteer. So, why this change has been experienced by Prerna, which is counterintuitive, and there is some kind of explanation that exists which defines the factors that what motivate beyond hygiene factors, beyond motivators, beyond hierarchy of needs. So, this is an extension of these theories. This example lays the foundation of the self-determination theory, which proposes that people prefer to feel they have control over their job or on actions that makes them or gives them more enjoyment to perform the task, rather than being paid and feel obligated to perform that task, which undermines their motivation. So, the point is that it is not every time necessary to be paid heavily by the organization and then perform. Sometimes for any individual or any employee, maybe the paycheck is not that much important, whereas the task, the kind of job he or she is performing is more satisfying, because that job has more freedom and autonomy. So, sometimes it happens that maybe any employee is not demanding enough and a salary, but yes, he is enjoying his job because he has lot of freedom to perform the job on his own. So, this theory is widely used in psychology, management, education and medical research, where people can find some kind of autonomy, freedom on their actions and decision making to perform the task in their own way. So, this is self-determination theory, that what an individual determines certain factors that motivate him to perform, rather than being motivated by external factors, like that any employee will not like to be controlled by any other factor. What is the basic tenet of self-determination theory? So, according to Ryan and Deci, it is a macro theory of human motivation and personality that concerns people's innate growth, tendencies and psychological needs. Now, it is an individual discretion that maybe any employee would say that if I am drawing heavy paycheck from my job, that is my growth, that is my intrinsic motivation, or that is my satisfaction. Whereas, there are employees who would say that I do not want to draw any heavy paycheck, but yes, if I have lot of autonomy, I have lot of competence to perform the job on my own, that gives me more sense of personal growth and satisfaction of psychological needs. This is the basic tenet of SDT. This is an acronym for self-determination theory, that this focuses on the degree to which human behavior is self-motivated based on people's choices and self-determined. So, these are the internal factors, intrinsic factors that a person highlights or want to cash upon, that what gives him satisfaction and motivation, which is very much internal in nature, which is very much psychological in nature. So, the emergence of SDT included research on intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation, which we have already discussed in the previous lecture, that how intrinsic motivation initiates an activity because it is interesting and satisfying for an individual employee, as opposed to doing an activity for the purpose of obtaining an external goal. That means, intrinsic motivation refers to initiate any activity which a person finds is interesting, enjoyable and satisfying. So, he or she is motivated to perform at that level based on intrinsic requirement or satisfaction, and he will be more unhappy to perform those jobs which are very much controlled by external factors. For example, any directive that any employee has received to perform the job in their way or based on their directives, then the motivation becomes intrinsic, which is very much controlled by some external factors. Therefore, we can say that self-determination theory is a theory of motivation that is concerned with the beneficial aspects of intrinsic motivation, that what an individual thinks is interesting and satisfying, and the harmful effects of extrinsic motivation, because extrinsic motivation, which comes from the other factors or authorities or directives, that under such circumstances an individual employee would not enjoy his work, so he is not that much motivated. So, this is the one part of SDT, that external and internal motivation plays an important role to define the motivation of an individual employee. The next is that what are those psychological needs? If we have talked about innate growth tendencies based on intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, the other aspect is what are those psychological needs that motivates an individual. Now, this theory will talk about the needs hierarchy theory. They have found an extension to those basic psychological needs, and these needs are very much important to foster well-being and health, as well-being and mental health of any employees is also an important aspect of any organization and which can never be ignored. So, recently OB professionals have talked about 3 psychological needs, that is autonomy, competence and relatedness, which are generally universal in nature. Everybody requires autonomy, he or she can take his own decision. They want to learn more techniques, they want to develop more skill and competence to enhance their performance, again it is a natural desire. And the other is relatedness, which is a sense of belongingness, that everybody wants to relate with their co-workers and other team members, which gives a sense of acceptance and relationship. So, these needs do exist among every employee based on time, culture or experience. No matter what is the country, no matter what is the culture that exists in any organization, but these psychological needs will never fade away, they will never become vague in any organization. Therefore, SDT identifies 3 innate needs, that is, if satisfied, they allow optimal function and growth. So, again coming back to the point that even if any employee who is paid heavily by any organization, but if these psychological needs are not satisfied, the person, the employee is not satisfied, is not motivated, is not happy to perform his job, because these factors when combined with heavy paycheck, then it leads to optimal functioning and growth of any individual employee. So, let us talk about more detail about these 3 factors. Autonomy, the desire to be causal agents of one's own life and act in harmony with one's integrated self. It is about what I desire, what I need, what I require, and it is something which I want to satisfy internally, which is related to an individual self. It is about an individual schema, what I want to be in any organization, not based on the directives that has been received by the higher authority, but what you intend to become or the way you want to contribute to the organization, that is autonomy. It is about being independent, but rather constitutes a feeling of overall psychological liberty and freedom of internal will. So, here maybe you have status, you have position, but at the same time we need to have some liberty, psychological freedom, that how I relate myself with this job in order to perform on my own. So, this is about the insidious willingness to perform the job. When a person is autonomously motivated, their performance, wellness and engagement is heightened rather than if a person is told what to do. For example, in other terms, controlled motivation. So, this is so obvious when you are creating your own space to perform your job in your own way, in your own style, then you are more engaged with the job, you are completely immersed, there is a sense of flow in your job or within you also, that you find difficulty to detach from your work. But if there is controlled motivation, if any employee is receiving any directive from the higher authorities to perform the job in its own way, they are motivating the employee based on their own thinking, then this autonomy will fade away or it will not exist in that job. So, autonomy is like psychological liberty or freedom. The other is competence. It is a desire to seek control, the outcome and experience mastery. Deci found that giving people unexpected positive feedback on a task increases their intrinsic motivation. That is so obvious that when you are receiving some kind of recognition based on positive feedback, that motivates you internally. There is intrinsic motivation and you find or perceive more meaning in performing the job because the positive feedback has fulfilled your need for competence. That means you are more internally motivated to perform the job more better in future while enhancing or expanding your competence by upgrading your skills and knowledge. So, additionally, SDT influences the fulfillment of meaning making, well-being and finding value within the internal growth of motivation. So, whenever an employee receives positive feedback for his performance, there is more perception of meaning in the work. The person can find more meaning that what it relates to me, how I am contributing to the organization for which I have received a positive feedback. Maybe if the person receives some extrinsic motivation from the higher authorities, maybe he will not perceive that job in that meaningful manner. The way he has perceived on his own, so meaningful that he could receive those positive feedback and enhance his performances again. So, this is about finding value within integral growth and motivation. Therefore, positive feedback on a task served only to increase people's intrinsic motivation and decreased extrinsic motivation for the task. So, under such circumstances, the employee will never complain about any extrinsic motivation. He is more concerned about intrinsic motivation based on the positive feedback and how and to what extent the person experiences meaningfulness in his task. Relatedness, as the term implies, the willingness to interact with, to be connected, caring for others is relatedness. It is the ability to feel a sense of both attachment to other people and a sense of belongingness among other people. So, without connections, self-determination is harder to achieve because the individual would lack access to both help and support. That is so important. No matter what kind of position an individual occupies in any organization, if sense of relatedness is missing, the person will find lot of difficulty in finding support or access to any resource to perform his task. So, relatedness is enhanced when individuals are respected and cared by others and are part of an inclusive environment. Now, this is so important line, word, a term, inclusive environment, where all the factors are being considered to make any organization diverse and inclusive. So, every employee coming from different kind of backgrounds are being taken care of. They are being more inclusive in nature, the policies are more inclusive in nature, which develops a sense of belongingness among employees. If these kind of environments are not created, then relatedness or sense of relatedness is undermined and there is more perception of cliques, criticism or groupism. So, when support for these needs is available, people will be intrinsically motivated to undertake tasks for their own sake because they are interesting, enjoyable and inherently rewarding. Under these conditions, people are autonomously motivated. So, it is not only paycheck, it is not only your competence, it is something that when you are being taken care of, that also motivates a person to contribute more while being internally or intrinsically motivated. So, this is another aspect of self-determination theory, that when the psychological needs of an individual in terms of autonomy, competence and relatedness are satisfied, then it leads to higher performances and higher levels of intrinsic motivation. So, this theory proposes that in addition to being driven by a need for autonomy, people seek ways to achieve competence and make positive connections with them. And of all the three needs, the autonomy need is the most important for attitudinal and effective outcomes. Now, the point is that when all the needs are also satisfied and they are of prime importance, autonomy is of double prime importance, because these needs will lead to outcomes, whereas the competence need appears to be most important for predicting performance. So, each and every need is interrelated and every need is highlighted when the other two needs are also highlighted. So, these three needs, autonomy, relatedness and competence, work in sync. When all the three needs are satisfied at different levels, it leads to ultimately intrinsic motivation, and the outcome is enhanced or heightened performance. Okay. The other is cognitive evaluation theory. This is another aspect of self-determination theory. In fact, here I can mention that when we are talking about self-determination theory, then the first is intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, the other is the basic psychological needs, and the cognitive evaluation theory. These form the mini theories of self-determination theory, that all these mini theories when combined, then the self-determination theory is established. So, according to cognitive evaluation theory, this theory has focused on contemporary theory hypothesizing that extrinsic rewards reduce intrinsic interest in a task. If we go back to the Prerna's example, that when she was working as a volunteer, she was enjoying her task more, and it was found that as soon as she was being paid for it, her motivation level went down. Similarly, the cognitive evaluation theory, it can be stated that when people are paid for work, it feels less like something they want to do, rather it is something that they have to do. So, there is more control when they are being paid and there is less control when they are doing on their own. So, when we talk about cognitive evaluation theory, it is about that intrinsic rewards reduce intrinsic interest in a task. So, it can be stated that the cognitive evaluation theory is a version of self-determination theory in which allocating extrinsic rewards for behavior that had been previously intrinsically rewarding tends to decrease the overall level of motivation if the rewards are seen as controlling. So, that means the intrinsic factor is being controlled by the extrinsic factors, then the intrinsic motivation is decreased and there is less excitement in the job to perform. So, there is a sense that I want to do is converted to I have to do. So, this reduces the motivation, intrinsic motivation of an employee. So, what does self-determination theory suggest about providing rewards? So, organizations have to take care the use of in the use of extrinsic rewards to motivate it and pursuing the goals from intrinsic motives, such as strong interest in the work itself is more sustaining to human motivation than our extrinsic rewards. So, the organizations need to take care to maintain that balance, that intrinsic rewards must be inconsistent with the intrinsic rewards for the employees. It should not be that if extrinsic rewards are more dominating, then they are killing the intrinsic motivation of an employee. So, organizations need to take care to maintain that balance, that employees are intrinsically motivated. So, this is the tenet of cognitive evaluation theory. Why cognitive evaluation theory this term? That any employee would evaluate the task that has been assigned to him, whether it gives him intrinsic satisfaction and motivation or not. If there is more extrinsic control, then it will not give that much of intrinsic satisfaction to any employee. So, the organizations have to maintain that balance to maintain motivation at both the levels. Similarly, cognitive evaluation theory suggests that providing extrinsic incentives may in case undermine intrinsic motivation. For example, if a computer program values writing code, the computer program enjoys writing codes, then he can perform to any extent. But as soon as he is being paid for writing the codes, his motivation, intrinsic motivation would suffer. She may or may not increase her number of lines of code per day in response to the intrinsic motivators. So, here at this point the programmer have evaluated his task based on the extrinsic rewards, which has tend to reduce his intrinsic motivation. So, we can say that intrinsic motivation contributes to the quality of work, while incentives contribute to the quantity of work. Now, it is an individual's cognitive assessment that whether you are more focused on quality of work, which is intrinsic, or there are employees who would focus on quantity of work because they will earn more money, they will get more chance to draw more or better income. But ultimately, if we are talking about SDT theory, then definitely more focus is on intrinsic motivation or intrinsic rewards. Okay, the other mini theory is self-concordance. A more recent outgrowth of self-determination theory is self-concordance. It is the degree to which employees' reasons for pursuing goals are consistent with their interest and core values. Here the thin line difference is, initially it was that what gives you satisfaction, intrinsic satisfaction will motivate you. Here in this mini theory of self-concordance, that any employee will pursue his goal or job only when the job is consistent with his core values, that there is a strong justification, strong reason that why an individual is performing this task. So, researchers have suggested that people who pursue work goals for intrinsic reasons are more satisfied with their job. They feel fit into their organization better and perform better because they are aligning with their own core values along with the organization. So, it is about what gives you respect in performing a particular job. If any employee would say that if I perform this job and will not help me to earn respect, which is his core value, then maybe the person is not satisfied or motivated to perform that job. If it is other way around, definitely the person will find the best fit in that organization to perform better. This can vary across cultures. For example, if individuals pursue goals because of intrinsic interest, they are more likely to attain goals, are happier when they do, and they are happy even when they are unable to attain them. That means, when they are performing the job in alignment with their core values and even they fail to perform the job, still they are happy because they could align their core values with the job and they are not much bothered about the outcomes. So, this is about self-concordance. It is about an individual's self core values in conjunction with the core value of the organization or the task. So, for individuals it means you should choose your job for reasons other than extrinsic rewards. So, in a self-determination theory, extrinsic rewards have no significance, but more focus is on intrinsic rewards. So, for organizations it means managers should provide intrinsic as well as extrinsic incentives. Managers need to make the work interesting, definitely provide recognition and link organization and employee goals and support employee growth and development. So, this here organizations have to play a very important role, that in order to retain talent, in order to sustain high performances, organizations need to create jobs in a way where they are in alignment with the intrinsic motivation or core values of the employees. Employees who feel that what they do is within their control and a result of the free choice are likely to be motivated but by their work and committed to their employees, right. So, this was about self-determination theory, where certain mini theories have been discussed and forms the basis of self-determination theory, that is about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, the basic psychological needs based on autonomy, competence and relatedness. Then they have the cognitive evaluation theory, where again they are talking about individuals' intrinsic and extrinsic rewards, and self-concordance theory. So, we are through with this first theory, contemporary theory of motivation, that is self-determination theory. We will continue in the next discussion. Thank you so much.